Great leaders are much more interested in finding out where their people are than they are in having their people find out where they are.
The 5,000 had a major miracle. They were receivers of the miracle, but there's something greater than being a receiver of a miracle, and that is to be a catalyst for a miracle from God.
And the thing that a finish line leader understands is that what they give up to help other people get up gives a high return.
There is no God like our God. No God like our God. He is the only God, the true, the living, the miracle answering God.
There's nothing in your life worthwhile that's downhill. You have never coasted to anything great in your life. You see, most people, they want to go through life. I want to grow through life.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Please be seated. I'm going to sit down and let's just take a moment and get acquainted. My name's John, and I'm your friend. And on the count of three, give me your name. 1, 2, 3. Nice to meet you. I am so honored to be here today. Thank you, Ron and Hope, for your wonderful, kind words about me. I've never been introduced as a person that's like COVID-19. You know, when you said, I came in your life and you'll never forget it, well, I'll never forget that intro. I almost just said my name is John and I'm COVID-19 today. But let me just say how honored I am to be here. First of all, I love, Ron and Hope, I love you. You are beautiful people. You're beautiful leaders. You're just, yeah. But I just love you dearly. And I love who you are. I love what you do. I love your desire to make a difference in people's lives. We just had our coaching conference. We have 2 conferences a year in Orlando for our coaches. We have the largest coaching company in the world, and we have almost 50,000 coaches from about 172 countries of the world. And Hope, I tell you, in Orlando, when you were there, right, you were right down front. You were all in. And I would look over at you, and you would be taking notes and just drinking in, and I knew everything you received that you're going to be able to give. So what I looked at, I said, there's a multiplier. There's a multiplier. And I was just honored to have you as one of our coaches. It's a real honor. I just want you to know. And so I love you too very, very much. And I've been looking forward to this time together. I was in DC yesterday and jumped on the plane this morning. And I'm here this morning, and I go to High Point University this afternoon. I go to Pittsburgh tonight. And, people say, John, I'm 75. People say, well, how do you handle that schedule? It's very simple. High energy, low IQ. It just works. If you had low energy, you couldn't do it. If you had a high IQ, you wouldn't do it. You got it? But when you have low energy and high IQ, it's that perfect storm, and it just lets you do it. But really, I honestly, I do it because I love to add value to people. And I'm here for one reason today, and my reason is to serve you, to help you, to add value to you, to give you some thoughts to put in your heart the things that are just going to make you a difference maker in the lives of others. So thank you so much for having you. Before I speak, just take one moment. When you become 65, you get wisdom. Okay. So when I'm looking out at some of you have really a long wait. It's truly going to be a while. But you get wisdom when you're set. When you're about 65, you get wisdom. Now, God's got a great sense of humor. When you're young, He gives you energy and no wisdom. And then when you get old, you get wisdom and no energy. But so I'm going to read this on my iPhone just for a second. I'm going to talk to you about. I'm going to read to you in 2 minutes. You're going to understand life because I have wisdom, and I'm going to give you. So we all have questions about life. So in 2 minutes, I'm going to answer those questions. In fact, look at your person beside you and say, "You're about to understand life." Go ahead and tell them that you're just about to understand life. Okay. In fact, look right back at them and say, "Why do you think I brought you here?" Huh? Okay. So here we go. Are you ready? You're just going to understand life. As soon as I get done reading, here we go. On the first day, God created the dog. God said, "Sit all day by the door of your house and bark at everybody that walks by. I'm going to give you a lifespan of 20 years." And the dog said, "Wow, that's too long to be barking. Give me 10 years and I'll give you the other 10. And God agreed. On the second day, God created the monkey. God said, "Entertain people, do monkey tricks, make them laugh. I'm going to give you a 20-year lifespan." The monkey said, "How boring. I have to do this for 20 years? I'll tell you what, let me give you back 10 years like the dog did, and I'll take 10, and God agreed. So on the third day, God created the cow. God said, "You must go out in the field with the farmer all day long, suffer under the sun, have calves, give milk to support that farmer. I'm going to give you 60 years. And the farmer said, "Wow, that's kind of a tough life to live for 60 years. Let me have 20 and I'll give you back the other 40, and God agreed. So on the fourth day, God created man. God said, "Eat, sleep, play, marry, enjoy your life. I'll give you 20 years. Man said, "What? Oh, only 20 years? Okay. I'll take my 20 and then give me the 40 that the cow gave you back, and the 10 that the monkey gave you back, and the 10 that the dog gave you back, okay?" And God said, "Okay, you got a deal." So that is why the first 20 years of our lives, we eat, sleep, play, enjoy ourselves. I see the train a-coming. The next 40 years, we slave in the sun to support our family. The next 10 years, we do monkey tricks to entertain the grandchildren. In the last 10 years, we sit on the front porch and we bark at everybody that goes by. You've just had life explained to you. I want to talk to you in this session about how to receive a return on failure. You see, in my world, 80% of my time is in the secular business community where I can be salt and light. And so when I'm in that world, they always talk about a return on investment. Sometimes they'll talk about a return on time. But I've never in my lifetime heard anybody talk about how to get a return on failure. And yet when you think about it, every one of us fail. Every one of us mess out. Now let me make sure I got the right crowd. How many of you have messed up at least one time in your life today? We all mess up. Isn't it interesting how much we mess up, and yet nobody ever talks about how to get a return on it? Because here's what I know. Everyone fails, but no one likes it. I mean, I've never run into somebody who said, "Have you had a good day?" They say, "Oh my gosh, super. Big failure today. Oh my gosh, got fired. Amazing day." You see, we all fail, and no one likes it. And when I was a young leader, I didn't like it either. In fact, because of failure and my fear of failure, there were a lot of times I didn't take risk, or there were a lot of times I didn't rise to probably the stature of my potential because I just thought, well, what happens if it doesn't work out? I was very privileged. I've had a lot of incredible people mentor and come into my life. But many, many years ago, Robert Schuller at the Crystal Cathedral became a wonderful mentor of mine and friend of mine. And he was such a possibility thinker. And so one evening we were having dinner and I was sharing with him. I said, I just sometimes don't attempt things because I have a fear of failure. And he gave me a question. He said, John, I want you to start asking yourself this question. And it was a good question. I'm going to give it to you now. It was a good question. It wasn't a great question, but it was a good question. A good question gets you started. A great question finishes it for you. And it was a good question. He said, John, here's what I want you to ask yourself. Ask yourself, what would I attempt if I knew failure wasn't possible? He said, just ask yourself that question, and that'll get you into the game. And so I said, wow, I think that's a good question. And so I'll start asking that. And probably for almost a year, every time I would come up against something that I thought was possible of a loss or a miss, I would ask myself, okay, what would happen if failure weren't possible? And wow, I would kind of get a little encouragement and courage, and I would launch in. But I quit asking the question for certain within a year, because it's not a great question. Because you see, if I ask myself, what would I attempt to do if failure was not possible, it's not a good question even when you think about it, because failure is always possible. Anything that sets you up for unrealistic expectations is not a good question. And so pretty soon I realized that everything I do has the possibility of failure in it. So it's not a good question, what would I attempt to do if failure were not possible, because failure is possible. And so through the years, I'm asking myself the question, I keep saying there's a better question, and there is. And now I'm going to give you a great question that you all need to ask yourself, because we're talking about how do you get a return on failure? And the question is, what would I attempt to do if I knew failure was possible? But I knew from it I would become a better person. See, we're going to talk now about, instead of being embarrassed by failure, we're going to start talking about how to embrace failure. And the question is, what would I attempt to do? Where would I step out if I knew that not only was failure possible, but if it happens, it makes me a better person? And for the next 45 minutes, I'm going to talk to you about how to make that happen. But before I talk to you about how to make it happen, let me talk to you about my journey with failure personally for a moment. Several years ago, I wrote a book called Failing Forward. This book has helped so many people in their life. And it's a book about how do you fail forward, so that when you fall, you're falling forward, you're gaining some ground. So let me tell you how I wrote that book. Many years ago, go back 20 years ago, Margaret and I were going on a cruise to see the fjords of Norway. And we had never been to Norway. We'd never seen the fjords of Norway. And so we were going to go on a cruise where you go in the inlets and see the fjords of Norway. And so about 10 days before we went on this cruise, I'm looking at my calendar, and all of a sudden I realized this is a 2-week cruise. So I sat down with Margaret. I said, hey, baby, this cruise is 2 weeks to see the fjords of Norway. I said, now, we've not been to the fjords, but doesn't it seem a little long? God created the heavens and earth in 6 days. And we're going to take 2 weeks to see the fjords of Norway. So we had a real good discussion. Then we went and took that great 2-week cruise to see the fjords of Norway. Anybody that doesn't believe in compromise doesn't stay married very long. But we did a deal. And the deal was I would go on a 2-week cruise to see the fjords of Norway if she would allow me to write a book so I could get something done while I'm seeing the fjords of Norway. So we got this room right at the front of the ship. I mean, it was all glass. It was terrific. I had a table just like this. I had my legal pad. I had my 4-color pen because, see, I write all my books with a pen by hand on a legal page. And so I took, that kind of a book will take at least about 2.5 legal pads. And so we're sitting up there and I'm writing my book on failure, on failing forward. And we'd go into one of these inlets and the ship would stop and the captain would say, to your left is a fjord. And so I'd stop writing and I'd look over to my left and there it was. Wow. That's something, isn't it? That's something. We'd go to another inlet and he'd tell me there was just one on the right, and I'd stop and there it was. That's a fjord. You know what, baby? That fjord looks just like that fjord. Cruise is over, book is finished. 230 legal pages, handwritten on failing forward. We put a rubber band around it. That's what, when I sent a manuscript to the publisher, a rubber band, 230 pages written, print that sucker and get it out. We're going off the ship, and Margaret looks at me and said, John, I love the book, thanks. I said, what do you like about it? She said, you're so honest. She said, on every page you talk not only about failure, but you talk about your failures. And you just say, well, I didn't do well here and I could have done better there. She said, the reader's going to love it because you're just open about your failures. I said, thank you, baby, thank you. Then she said, but honestly, she said, there's a problem. I said, what's the problem? She said, you didn't get all your failures in the book. She said, I see a series coming. Failure 101, 201, 301. She said, it's just in you. She said, this is one of your gifts. One of your gifts is failure. So I wrote Failing Forward. And then a few years later, I wrote Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn. And this little teaching I'm giving you right now, it'll become a book, a Return on Failure. You're right in my sweet spot right now. I got failure down. So you got to take in everything I'm about to give you because I have failure perfected. Okay? How many of you can relate to this fact that perhaps how many of you might how many of you had some good experience in failure? Come on, talk to me, okay? You got it, okay, here we go. So, let's get going. Number one, I'm so excited about teaching this lesson to you. Number one is be responsible to properly prepare people for failure. If you are a leader, you need to properly prepare people to not only the fact that they will fail, but how to get a return on that failure. Because Max Dupree says the first responsibility of a leader is to define reality. So what I'm saying by that is you need to teach your people about failure. By the way, this is incredibly true in the Bible. In fact, there are only 2 cases of anyone in the Bible there's only two people in the Bible, Nehemiah and Joseph, that the Bible doesn't talk about any failure in their life. Every other person in the Word, it talks about losses, misses, failures, etc. So as a leader, you have to properly prepare people for failure. And let me tell you why this is important. First of all, in the beginning of life and people in any kind of a journey, spiritually or whatever, in the beginning, the fear of failure is the highest. So when people get ready to approach something, they're asking themselves, because they've never done it, well, I wonder if I can do it. So the fear of failure is at the highest at the beginning. And secondly, the possibility of failure is the highest at the beginning. If you're going to fail, it's almost always because it's new. In fact, I have a whole lecture that says you're never good the first time. And I have people all the time that say, well, I've never done this before, so I'm working hard because I really want to do a great job. And I say, relax. It won't be that good. This is your first time. First time, you don't get greatness the first time. I mean, when you learn to talk, you didn't talk in sentences. When you learn to walk, you didn't say, let's go around the block. You took 2 steps, you fell. You said one word that nobody could even understand except the grandparents. You see, in the beginning, we're not even supposed to be good. It's the beginning. We're just starting out. It's okay. So my fear is at its highest peak at the beginning. The fact that I'm not going to be very good is at the highest peak at the beginning. And what happens is, when I do these two things and I fail, my response at the beginning has a tendency to be the wrong response, because one more time, I haven't done as well as I wanted to do. So all that means is that as a leader, you sit with your people and you deal realistically with them about the fact that life is hard, life is difficult, life has changes in it, and that there will be failure in your life. I fail, you fail, we all fail, okay? So that's part of the process. So in the beginning, properly prepare people for failure. There's nothing wrong with that. It's very important. Hey, in this world, you will have tribulations, okay? So that's the first thing. The second thing you want to do if you want to have a good return on failure is that you want to keep failure and success together. What happens to us is that we separate it, and this isn't good. What we do is we take failure and success and we put them as far apart as we possibly can. And what we basically tell people is this: succeed, don't fail. Do it right, don't mess it up. And we separate success and failure, and that's a wrong response. Never ever should we separate success. They're not meant in any way to be separated. For 40 years, I've had what I call learning lunches. People ask me often, well, how do you develop yourself? How do you grow yourself? And one of my greatest growth tools is that every month for 40 years, I've had a learning lunch. And I sit down with somebody bigger than me, better than me, smarter than me, more experienced than me, more successful than me, and I buy their lunch. And while I'm buying their lunch and they're eating, I'm asking them 7 questions. And it's from that 45 minutes to an hour and a half that I have with them that I get through these questions, and I grow and I learn. And this is a life-changing growth practice. And one of the questions I ask is, what's the most important lesson that you've ever learned in your life? And when I ask the question, what's the most important lesson you've ever learned in your life, I've asked this question now hundreds of times to hundreds of different people over 40 years. And let me tell you, there's one thing that's always the same. Whenever I ask them, what's the most important lesson you ever learned in your life? Every time, not most times, not almost every time. Every time when I ask them, what's the most important lesson they ever learned in their life, they'll talk about a failure, a loss, a problem, a dark period. They'll say, well, wow, if they're in business, I went bankrupt. And I had to come back and regroup, or I had a loss of a child, and they'll talk about a dark time and then how they came through it. And I would ask that question. I would always say, the most successful people I know, they never try to act like they missed failure or they avoided failure. In the most important lesson in their life, which something that is something very good to them, they have failure failure and success are kept together. This is huge. Don't separate them. You're not supposed to separate them. In fact, it's not healthy to separate them. In fact, it's not even life. Life doesn't separate success, failure. It isn't like God says, okay, this is a week. It's going to be a good week for you. Just going to be a good week, and you'll not have any mess ups, you'll not have any problems, you'll not have any difficulties. It's just a good week. And the next week, God says, now, this is your bad week. Nothing good's going to happen to you. You're just going to have loss and disappointment. No. You've never had a good week without bad things happening. And you've never had a bad week without good things happening. So why, if life is that way, why do we try to separate it? It's not healthy. Let me explain. Success and failure needs to be close together because, let's say I'm really on a roll. I'm succeeding. Everything I touch is turned to gold, and I'm on a roll, and it's so good. I need to keep failure right beside success. Because in my success, if I keep failure close to me, it'll give me humility. I'll never get arrogant. I'll never begin to think that I'm the reason for every good and perfect gift in my life. It'll constantly help me understand, yes, I'm on a roll and things are falling and it's really good, but if I keep failure close to success, there's a humility that I'll continue even when I'm on that successful roll. Does that make sense to you? Okay. Now, but let's say I'm in the ditch. I'm having a real bad week, and it's loss and miss and failure and mistakes. With that failure, I need to keep success real close to that. Why do I need to keep success close to me when I'm on a failure roll? Because if I keep success close to my failure, it'll teach me resiliency. It'll get me back in the game. I won't lay in the ditch and say, it's over. I'll either be up or I'll be getting up, and I'll climb back out. So you see, with my success, I keep failure close for humility. And with my failures, I keep success close for resiliency. And let me tell you something. When they're close together, they even the other out. I was in a Q&A recently. So I was asked the question, you just get all kind of questions in Q&A. And the person said, well, John, tell me about your most recent failure. And I said, they said, have you failed recently? I said, well, yeah. I said, I'm sure I failed probably in the last week, but for sure, I'm sure I failed in the last month. And they said, well, what is it? I said, well, I'm not sure. Let me think about it for a moment. And then I got embarrassed. I couldn't think about, I know I failed in the last month and probably in the last week, and I couldn't pull it out. And I started to get embarrassed, and then I just flipped the coin. If somebody had said, John, tell me about when's the last time you succeeded? I've succeeded this month. Well, tell me, what was it? And I'd say, oh gosh, just give me a moment. I got to think about it for a moment. You see, when you keep success and failure together, you begin to run an even path where in your failures, success gives you resilience, and your success failures give you humility, and your success, when you have a great success, you rejoice in the success, but it's not like the most amazing thing in the world. And when you have a failure, you don't want to jump off the bridge like this is the most difficult thing in the world. It levels you out. It levels, and what people need is leaders who have an evenness to them, that when everybody else is losing it, they're not losing it. And when everybody else was looking for it, they got it. Does this make sense? So you just keep them together. And they help each other. They really help each other. But if you separate them, they can't help each other. They can't help each other. They're too far apart. Make sense? Wow. Let me give you number 3. You're doing so good. Wow. By the way, Bill Gates said one time, success is a lousy teacher. It makes people think they can't lose. Number 3, understand the difference between good misses and bad misses. Now, I've never read anything about this. I've never heard anybody teach about this. But in my understanding of failure and how to get a return on it, I understand it. And I hope I can teach it well. This is, of all the things I'm going to teach, this is the most challenging for me to teach. But I'm going to give it my best shot, okay? Now, what I mean by understand the difference between good misses and bad misses is all misses are not the same. There's a good miss, which means you didn't hit it. It means you didn't win. Are you with me? It's a loss, it's a failure, but there's a good miss, and a good miss is like my first book. A good miss allows you to fail forward. You didn't get there, but you fell a little closer. A bad miss is exactly the opposite. In a bad miss, instead of failing forward, you fail backward. Till after the miss, you're a little further. So it's possible to have misses that move you closer to what you want to become. And it's possible to have misses that move you further away than you want to be. Let me explain it this way. A good miss, let's say that I failed. A good miss is where I make adjustments. I look and say, oh my gosh, that didn't work. I gotta adjust. I gotta change some things. That's a good miss. Are you with me? So a good miss is where I make adjustments. A bad miss is where I make excuses. World of difference. It's not even close to being the same. By the way, you can go from failure to success, but you can never go from excuses to success. It doesn't happen. It can't happen. You can't make excuses and get to success. It's an impossibility. You can go from failure to success. The prodigal went from failure to success. But if he makes excuses, he never goes to his father's home. And by the way, if you're talking about excuses, which I'm not right now, but since I'm there, I might as well stay for a moment. If we're thinking about excuses, the worst excuse in your life is a good excuse. Because good excuses are close enough that you believe them. You know, when it's a lousy, bad, ridiculous, stupid excuse, you know it. And when you tell anyone else, they know it. Everybody knows a stupid excuse. But when it's a real good excuse, they'll come alongside of you and say, oh yeah, I understand. Yeah, well, of course, that's right. You see, a good excuse is bad because you believe a good excuse. And I know people who have lived on good excuses all of their life. If ifs and buts were candies and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. And I watch it and I'm saying, well, if and but, no. See, there's a difference between being a miss-up and a mess-up. You can miss up if it's a good miss. But if it's a mess-up, you go south. So don't confuse a mess-up with a miss-up. A lot of people, they have a miss up, and if they don't understand excuses or if they don't understand misses, they can make a miss up become a mess down. So the best way that I can teach this, because I ask myself, how can I teach this? Because it's an incredible principle, but it's not easy to teach. So let me give it a shot. I love this. For many years, I've read and known about Portia Nelson's autobiography in 5 short chapters. Okay, you don't need to write this down. In fact, for the next 2 minutes, you don't need to write anything down. Just listen. It's too hard to write down. First of all, I'm going to read this to you. It's going to take me 2 minutes to read it to you. It's Portia Nelson's autobiography in 5 short chapters. And they're short chapters, not long ones. Now, I'm going to give them to you. I'm going to read them to you. And after each chapter, I'm going to pause for a moment. And I want you to ask yourself, was that a good miss or was that a bad miss? Okay? Let's see how well you do. Chapter 1. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I'm helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Is that a good miss? Or is that a bad miss? How many of you think it's a good miss? How many of you think it's a bad miss? How many of you don't think? I'm having fun with you. Now let me just say about chapter 1. I don't know if it's a good miss or a bad miss yet. When you miss, in this chapter, fell in a hole, took a long time, I'm lost. Okay, it's definitely a miss. Are you with me? But let me tell you, when you miss immediately, as soon as you fail immediately, you don't know if it's a good miss or bad miss. You can't determine a good miss or a bad miss by the miss. Hang on, fasten your seatbelt. You determine a good miss or a bad miss by how you respond. It's your response to the miss. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. Can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Good miss or bad miss? Chapter 3. Stay with me. We're going to come home in a moment. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It's my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Are you ready? You won't miss this. Chapter 5. I walk down another street. You just got the good miss. I walk down another street. I was playing golf one day with Tom Watson. If you play golf, you know he's a great golfer. He's won over 50 tournaments. He would be for sure in the top 10 golfers ever. Maybe top 5. So we were playing around the golf and we were having dinner afterwards, and we were talking about how complicated, how hard golf is. And he told me something that was very interesting. He said, John, I've won over 50 golf tournaments professionally. He said there are only 5 golf tournaments that when I teed it up on the first day, Thursday, I was so much in rhythm and my game was just, the tempo was just right. He said, there's only 5 times on the first day I teed it up, I thought to myself, I'm going to win this tournament. He said the other 46, 47 wins, somewhere in those 4 weeks or 4 days of Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, my swing got out of rhythm. And I had to go to the driving range after the match and I had to work on my swing. He said, John, almost all of my victories, I've had to adjust myself to victory. He said, seldom are victories automatic. And when he said he has to adjust himself to victory, I thought he understands good misses. He understands what he has to do. You see, it's a good miss because he's back out there and he's working that swing back out. You adjust your way to victory. Again, a good miss is when you make adjustments. A bad miss is when you make excuses. A good miss is when you change for the better, and a bad miss is when you don't change. Okay, let me ask you a question. I'm ready to go to 4. Excuse me. Are you learning something? Look at your neighbor. You're learning something. Your head's so much down. You're just taking notes like crazy. Look at your neighbor and say, I'm learning something. Go ahead and tell them that. Look right back at them and say to them, not enough. Dear Lord, keep taking notes. You're not even close to learning it all yet. Number 4. Number 4, embrace hard. If you want to get a return on failure, embrace hard. By the way, Mark Cole, who's our CEO of all of our companies and part owner, this is his phrase. He loves that phrase, embrace hard. The best way that I would explain it is this. Everything worthwhile is uphill. Yes. It's all uphill. My name is John. I'm your friend. I'm here to help you. It's all uphill. If you have a relationship over the years that's just gotten more beautiful, it's uphill. This 25th anniversary, come on, Ron, of this church, it's uphill. It's uphill. Everything if you've got dreams are all uphill. Have you ever heard anybody say, man, I had this incredible downhill dream? See, a downhill dream is where you coast to it. You see, here's the problem. People have uphill hopes. And they've got downhill habits. You can't go uphill with downhill habits. And one of the downhill habits that people have is that life is easy. Life should be easy. Why should I have to struggle? And Scott Peck, he wrote a book, and it's a classic book. I read it, 25 years ago. And it was one of the books that changed my life. If you go to my home office library, I've got a whole section of books that those are the books that changed my life, and I keep them together. And one of them was Scott Peck's book, The Road Less Traveled. And Scott Peck in The Road Less Traveled, the first 3 words of the book are worth the price of the book, because his first 3 words are, life is difficult. And then he goes on to say, if you will embrace life is difficult, There'll be a time in your life, it'll no longer be difficult because you've embraced that all your life it's going to be uphill. All your life you're going to climb. All your life you're going to have effort. He said, once you embrace that thought, it no longer becomes difficult. But if you think that somehow success should come to you and good things should just fall. He said, if you just think that you're not going to have to work for he said, you have to, if you think life it should be easy, he said, life will be forever difficult for you. This is huge. I mean, have you ever heard anybody, and they were interviewed, they're highly successful, so at the top of their profession, the top of the mountain, okay? Have you ever heard anybody that was interviewed and somebody said, now how did you get to the top? And you've never heard somebody when asked the question, how did you get to the top? Look at them and then look around and go, oh my goodness. Look where I am. Oh my gosh. Huge. Wow. I have no idea how I got here. I just woke up. Look at where I am. Listen, you're not on a success journey, you're on drugs. If you got to the top, you know exactly how you got there. And it wasn't easy, and it took a long time, and you had to give a lot of effort, and you had a lot of drop back. Have you ever read a book on accidental accomplishments? It's uphill all the way. Not part of the way. You say, John, you're 75. They just told me recently I have written more material on leadership than any person's ever lived in the history of the world. I'm the largest nonfiction selling author in the world. And people come to me and they look at me and they say, oh my gosh. I had a guy the other day, he came to me and he said, I would like to do what you do. That's an IQ test. I said, of course you would like to do what I do. Could I ask you a question? Yeah. Would you like to do what I did? Would you like to do what I did so you can do what I do? Please, my name is John, I'm your friend. Let me remind you, the did comes before the do. And if you don't did, you don't do. You see, every day I write. People say, what do you mean every day you write? What I mean is every day I write. Well, what do you do on Christmas? I write. What do you do on Thanksgiving? I write. What do you do on your birthday? I write. What do you do on vacation? I write. What do you do when you're sick? I write. What part of this do you not understand? Every day. My life is simple. It's not complicated. Every day I do 5 things. Every day I read, every day I think, every day I file, every day I ask questions, every day I write, every day I read, every day I think, every day I file, every day I ask questions, every day I write, every day I read, every day I think, every day I file, every day I ask questions, every day I write, every day I read, every day I think, every day I file, every day I ask questions, every day I write. Did I tell you every day I read, every day I think, every day I write? And every day. Every day. Oh, I'd like to do what you do. See, there's our problem. We look at somebody that has climbed uphill all their life, and we want to meet him with a helicopter. Now here's the challenge. You got to do the do before the did. And if you don't do the do, you don't get the did. So if you don't do the did, you're in deep doo-doo. I'm a communicator. I'm not an educator. An educator takes something simple and makes it complicated. I'm a communicator. I take something complicated and make it simple. I put the cookies on the lower shelf so everybody can have some. This isn't complicated. You want a good high return on failure? You got to embrace hard. You just have to understand that when life is difficult, life's not picking on you. Life is life. And it's not supposed to be easy. It's not supposed to be quick. It's not supposed to just happen. Most people, they don't lead their life, they accept their life. And in accepting their life, they can't figure out what's wrong with their life. Everything worthwhile, it's uphill. Embrace hard. Okay, number 5, I gotta hurry. I'm so sorry. I'm a little bit behind, but it's not my fault, it's your fault. It's not my fault because you're just wonderful. You're taking notes. Every person you're taking notes. You're going crazy. I can see it, and I just love it. And because you're so responsive and you're with me and you're so eager to learn and you're so hungry and you're leaning in, I'm teaching more and taking longer than I normally would. If you were a lousy crowd, I'd be done by now. It's your fault. So look at your neighbor and say, you're responsible for John teaching longer. Go ahead and tell him that. You're responsible. You're totally responsible. Can't be John. Number 5, come on, here we go. I'm not done. Hang with me. Number 5, anticipate failure. Okay, I know. When I start talking about anticipating people think, oh God, John, are you going negative here? No, not a bit. Listen to me. Anticipation influences preparation. As my mentor John Wooden told me many, many times, when opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare. So I want to talk to you about anticipating failure. 25 years ago, my book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, was first published. And immediately it became a bestseller. Literally, within 2 weeks, it just took off, and it sells as many books. It's the number 1 leadership selling book ever written. And we decided, since it was 21 Laws of Leadership, we decided to have a Learjet and go 3 cities a day, literally for 7 days, and hit 21 cities in America, where I would go, morning I would be in one city talking about the book, and afternoon, and then the evening talking about the book. And by the time, when we went across America, by the time we got to San Diego, the book was already on the top 10 New York Times bestseller list. So we're coming back into Atlanta. We're flying back into Atlanta, highly successful book tour. And we're getting ready to land at PDK. And about 50 feet from the ground, we hit a wind shear. And that plane immediately dropped to the ground. It not only dropped to the ground immediately, but instead of dropping straight on that runway, it dropped a little sideways on that runway, and immediately I thought, we're going to flip. we're going to flip and I'm going to die. And let me tell you something. I don't know if you ever want to die, but you certainly don't want to die when your book just hit. If I'm going to die, let me die in misery. Like it's already been a bad day, let me go, let me go, let me go. In fact, let me help you, let me go. Let's just go, go, go. You understand? So I'm thinking, wow, I just found out last night I'm on the New York Times bestseller list, and now I go die. That pilot, when that plane hit just a little sideways, that pilot put that nose into the air and we're back in the air, and I go, oh my, whew. That was close. I had people on the plane with me. Well, that was close. He circles the plane. We land the plane right this time, and we get off the plane. I literally get on my knees and I kiss the ground. And then the pilot gets off the plane and I kiss him. And then I ask him, how did you so quickly think of getting that plane back in the air? Here's what he told me. Oh, he said, that wasn't a quick decision at all. I said, what do you mean? He said, I made that decision 20 years ago. When I became a pilot, I asked myself, what can go wrong in a plane? And for everything that would go wrong, I made decisions of how I was going to change. And don't miss this. This is huge. This is huge. He said, and so 20 years ago, I made that decision because he said, I just decided that there's more room for error in the air. Good thought, pilot. Now, the only reason he averted that disaster is he anticipated it. And I'm just here to tell you that it's healthy to anticipate failure, not to live in fear of failure, but when it comes, to be able to respond quickly to it. Wow. For example, I'll give you an example. If you ask me what my bucket list would be, I would say that my bucket list is to see a nation transformed. And it's too long of a story, so I don't have time to tell you, but I literally have a nonprofit organization that we go into countries and we teach values in countries to get 10% of the population in small groups learning good values, because what we know is if people learn good values and live good values, they become more valuable. And so that's how we transform countries. I wish I had time. I don't have time to tell you the story, but it's a great story. But I want to say to you, Ron and Hope, you two help us financially to make that a reality. You two people are getting a huge return on your investment because we're putting it in nations and we're seeing nations transform. I don't have time I can't tell you this story, but just trust me, we're seeing, thank you, Ron. Thank you, Hope. Thank you, Redemption. Thank you very much. You're helping us. You're making a difference. You're making a huge difference. And so I'm so grateful to you. I'm so humbled. I'm so indebted to you. Okay. So I have a bucket list to see a nation transformed. Now it hasn't happened since 1816. It hasn't happened. Last time it happened was in England when Wilberforce in Parliament got slavery outlawed. And the cancer of that country was removed, and then it came across the Atlantic. So when I talk about transforming a nation, it's a huge goal. And people come to me all the time and they'll say, John, do you think that you'll reach your goal? And I said, the odds are against it. But can I explain something to you? I'd rather try something so big that my odds are very small of ever achieving it than try something that's so small that I achieve it. Some Christians, the greatest thing they ask God to do is bless their cereal before they eat it. I want to do something so big that if it happens, people that know John Maxwell will say, he's not that good. Only God. Only God could do that in him. Only God could do that. I want to live in that space that I call guru. So let me give you mental preparation on anticipating failure. Don't miss this. This is so practical. This is so helpful. You're such a beautiful people to talk to. But I have mental pressure because I anticipate that this isn't going to be easy. You see, everything worthwhile is uphill, but it's not this. It's this kind of. It's ridiculous. So I have 3 resolves mentally I have in my life, and the first resolve is I will keep moving, because when you have something big that you're trying to accomplish, the tendency for you is that when you have several misses, you begin to stop. You begin to slow down. You say, wait a minute. Oh my gosh, I gotta hold on. You see, whenever a challenge happens that's big and something goes south, people begin to freeze. The natural tendency is to say, oh my gosh, okay, I'm going to, and you can't stop. The reason you cannot stop is because you only attract people and resources as you move. Don't miss this. I call it, this is another lecture. I don't have time for this. I mean, Ron only gave me a half a day. I don't know why he's so cheap on time, but that's another deal. That's another deal. I don't know what I'm going to do. I love you, but hey, but I call it action attraction. And action attraction says that when you begin to move, when you know who you are and you know what you want to accomplish and you start moving in that direction, your mind will think things it's never thought before. Your eyes will see things they've never seen before. Your mouth will say things that has never said before. Your hands will be able to do things that have never done before. And you'll begin to attract people that you've never attracted before. But it's because you're moving. When you stop moving, the resources stop. God doesn't bless stand up, He blesses step out. And so, as I anticipate the possibility of not making it or failure or losses, here's what I know. When I'm in the thick of it, I will keep moving. Number 2, I will keep adjusting. We've already talked about you got to keep adjusting. You never lose sight of what your goal is. You never lose sight of your vision. But you also understand as you start moving, you learn things and you find things you didn't know, and you have to adjust your way to it. And number 3, I will keep believing. I will keep believing. And because I anticipate failure, and because I anticipate it won't always be easy, and I anticipate losses, I will keep moving, I will keep adjusting, I will keep believing. You see, you don't have to believe in me. I know a lot of successful people that they didn't have others around them believe in them. You don't have to believe in me, but can I tell you something? I have to believe in me. If I believe in me, now all of a sudden I got a shot at the moment that I allow your unbelief to affect mine. Then it's, are you with me? So you got to anticipate failure. Okay, now. Oh, I'll skip that one. Did I tell you how many points are in this lesson? I didn't, did I? Very good. All right. I'm good. A rookie mistake in speaking is to tell people how many points you have, because they expect you to cover every one of them. What you don't know won't hurt. Can I do 2 more, Ron? And then I'll promise you. Well, I know it's yours, but if they have to go to the bathroom, it's not mine. Trust me. I learned time ago, I learned 2 things. Don't ever try to communicate when people have to go to the bathroom or when people are hungry. You're not that good. You can't compete. So can I do 2 more points? Okay, whatever point I'm on, okay. I think let's say 6. Did I count? Okay, number 6. Encourage others with your failures. Encourage others with your failures. So I'm a young pastor. By the time I was 28, I had the 10th largest church in America. And I'm in a little town. I'm in a little town in Lancaster, Ohio, a town of 30,000 people, and we have over 3,000 people coming to church. Now this is we're back in 77, 78. We're back in the 70s when, I mean, Ron's got more people than that in his restrooms on Sunday, you know what I mean? But there was a time when that was a big, you follow me? And I'm just a kid, I'm in my 20s. And so I had my first church growth conference, and I brought in 4 speakers, one for the first morning, one for the first afternoon, second morning, and second afternoon. I was going to be the last speaker of the 4. And so the first speaker got up, and he just talked about the success of their church and his ministry. And to be honest with you, all he talked about was his success. And it was very good. It was very good. But by the time he was done that morning, I was getting a little tired of his success. And in the afternoon, the next preacher got up, and he talked about his success all afternoon. And after the first day, I thought, I'm kind of filled up with success. I've had about all the success I can handle. Okay, we got one more day. The third guy gets up. Now, back then, I'm in my 20s. I don't have enough sense or leadership ability to tell guys, you just can't do this. You can't, because we've got success now all day the first day. And now I'm saying, could we get back to what life is all about a little bit? And so the third guy, he got up and all he talked about was success. And by this time, I'm ready to go vomit. So during the lunch, I said to him, I said, you know what, guys, you have lunch. I got to go to my office because we can have no more. We've had enough success. So I got up that afternoon and had my legal pad. I had about 5 pages. I wrote fast as I could. And I said, I want to talk to you about flops, failures, and fumbles. I want to talk to you about all the screw-ups I've had. I'm going to talk about all the stupid things I've done in the ministry. I'm going to talk about the messages that weren't any good. I told him, one time, I preached an entire message on Samson. And every 2 or 3 minutes, the people would break out and laugh. And I kept thinking, what are they laughing about? And I know I love humor, but I'm saying something funny that I can't figure it out. So when I got done, I had a lady who could hardly wait to reach me. She just almost ran up to me, and she looked at me and she smiled from ear to ear. She said, that was the greatest message on Tarzan I've ever heard in my life. I said, what do you mean? She said, you called Samson Tarzan throughout the whole message. Tarzan? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I also had Noah one time married to Lot. Now, if you want to, I can go an hour on my failures. Listen, if you want to hear my successes, we can do that in one day. If you want to go to my failure seminar, it'll be a week long. Thank you very much. And I got up in front of those pastors. My church was packed out. And I began to talk about the flops, the failures, the fumbles I made, and all the stupid mistakes I'd made. I remember one time in this city of 30,000, I put a map as big as this up there, and I had every street in our city, and I said, we will mark every street that we have invited somebody and somebody comes to our church. And we had a 6-week campaign, and after about the 4th week, I had about 1/10 of those city streets marked. And now it's terrible to fail, but when you do it that size, and everybody comes and looks at us, ooh, whoa. I spent all afternoon talking about my failures. And then I looked at those pastors and said, this is the 10th largest church in America. I'm 28. And I just want you to know, you're not going to have all success. You're going to have mess ups and misses, but it's okay. if you'll just get back up, be like my friend, I'm never down, I'm either up or getting up. I said, if you would just absolutely have that attitude, you could build it. Those pastors were on the feet. They gave me a standing ovation. They stood in line. Back then you had these cassettes that you did on roll and sap duplicators, and that line lasted for an hour and a half. Pastors wouldn't leave without that cassette. I had a guy write me a letter. That was in Ohio. He said, I drove back to Kansas. I listened to that message 7 times on the way home. Did he think I would get better? Now, what am I saying? I learned that day as a kid that if you want to impress people, talk about your success. If you want to impact people, talk about your failures. And there's a world of difference. And my name is John, and I'm your friend. And the only difference between you and me is I failed more than you. I'm not being humble, just being honest. If you want to get a return on your failure, one of the best things you can do is you can encourage other people with your loss. I had a guy come up to me at a conference and he said, I wish I could have heard you 20 years ago. And I said, no, you don't. He said, what do you mean? I said, you don't wish you could have heard me 20 years ago. Oh, he said, you're wrong. I wish I could have heard you 20 years ago. I said, I appreciate that. That's good. No, you don't. He said, what do you mean? No, you don't. He said, honestly, if I could have heard 20 years ago what I heard today, it would have changed my life. And I looked at him and I said, if you had heard me 20 years ago, you wouldn't have heard what you heard today. Do you think I came out of my mother's womb with the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership? If I could have one wish in my life, my wish would not be that you could see me at 75. My wish would be you could have seen me at 25 in a little country church. More misses than hits, more downs than ups. If you could have seen me at 25, every one of you would be greatly encouraged. That's a fact. That's a fact. What is beautiful is that God takes our misses and losses and fumbles and flops and failures, and He can turn them. He can turn them into victory for Him. It's what makes the Christian life a different life than the life of the world. So I got one more. I got to give this to you. I promise you I'll be done in 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 7 minutes. In less than 10 minutes, I'll be done, okay? Don't miss this. Number 7, if you choose the right response to failure, it will develop your character. It'll develop your character. We have 7 companies. And in one of our companies, we had what we called the executive circle, which would mean every month I would have a number of executives get on a call with me. And every month I would talk to a CEO, a very successful CEO somewhere in America. So I'm on one of those calls, and then the call went something like this. For 20 minutes, the CEO would give us their best practices of how they have built the company. And then for 20 minutes, I would teach leadership lesson off the best practices, and then I would ask questions, and then I would open it up, and the executives would jump in and they would ask questions. We were in the question phase, and I asked this CEO, because he had been so honest in his best practices, talking about how he had made bad decisions and wrong decisions, and how he had made mistakes. And he was very authentic. He was very real. By the way, I don't think people want a perfect leader. I do think they want an authentic one. And he was very authentic about his hits and misses, and he had a lot of misses. I'm not giving you his name because every one of you in this room would know his name, at a multi-billion-dollar company. So I went back in my question. I called him by name and I said, okay, let's talk about your mistakes, your failures, your misses, your losses. I said, if you could go back and do over one or two or three of the top, maybe your top 5 failures. If you could go back and do them over, which one would it be? And his answer startled me. It changed me. He said, John, I don't want to do any of them over. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I don't want to do any of them over. Well, now wait a minute, I thought you said you had a lot of misses and losses and failures. He said, I did. I don't want to go back and do them over. I said, why wouldn't you want to go back and have a do-over? Why wouldn't you want to go back and have another shot at it? Here's what he said. He said, John, every one of my failures, it stopped me. And I looked at that failure, I looked at that loss, and I asked questions. And he said, every loss was a lesson. And he said, the lessons I learned from my failures, I would not exchange them for any do-over. And the character that I've developed, he said, if I could go back and do them over, I would lose my character. If I could go over and do them over, I would lose my lessons. I'll take my character, I'll take my lessons with my failures. And that day I said to myself, that man knows how to receive a return on failure. I love you very much. I love you very much, and I'm honored that I could even be here to be with you and have some time with you. I'm enjoying you immensely. You're beautiful people. You're so receptive. I have a feeling that what I deliver to you will be passed on to others. I have a feeling that what I give to you. So I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful for that time and opportunity. When we were flying down from Washington, D.C., I was with Mark and Erin today. She's our content curator. And we were talking about how many of you are pastors or on church staff? Would you raise your hand? Oh my gosh, Ron. You have such a wonderful work here. Think of all of the leaders that you're talking to today, that you're letting me talk to. There is a free app that'll just allow you to grow. And it's totally free, okay? It's totally free. And if you just go to the Maxwell Leadership app, that's where we have our podcast. Our podcast is the #1 leadership podcast in the world. How many millions have 25 million people have watched our leadership podcast. And it's free for you. My Minute with Maxwell. Did they just go to the Maxwell Leadership app, right? Just write it down. Go to Maxwell Leadership, it's free. But I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. It hasn't happened yet, but we're getting close. It will happen by the end of this year. Don't you think? By the end of this year. One of the things I've longed to do for pastors and leaders is I write every day. I write lessons just like I just gave you. I'm going to give you, we're going to take a break in a moment, and I'll give you another lesson I write. But in the last year, I've been thinking about how I wish that what I wrote as far as lessons could be passed on to you, so that you would have lessons like this, so that you could teach them to your people, or you could take your staff or your people. And so we're getting on the app, by the end of the year, we literally there'll be a John Maxwell leadership lesson that I have written every week that'll be on that app. Now that won't be free. You do understand that. You understand that. I had somebody the other day said they wanted me to sponsor them. I said, I'm not going to sponsor you. Sponsor yourself. When you sponsor yourself, I'll come along and help you. But you got to bet on yourself first. Why would I bet on you if you don't bet on you? Why would I invest in you if you won't invest in you? Why would I give to you if you won't give? You go first and I'll come in behind you. but I'm not sponsoring you. So it'll become available. So if you just go to the Maxwell Leadership app, we'll let you know when it's going to happen. And I'm going to give one. Would you like to have a lesson like I just taught you today? That you could pass on to your team or to your group? And I said, Mark, we'll do a lesson a week for them. We'll have their Maxwell, and you can go online, and it'll help you, because let me tell you something, as pastors and leaders, you're very busy, and sometimes you run out of time. And if you just had somebody like John, who's your friend, who would have a lesson for you, then you'll work it, you'll tweak it. In fact, when you get done, you'll make it better than I gave it to you. You follow me? But I'm really getting, I did this years ago, and I had 100,000 people get my cassette tapes because I would give them lessons. That's back in the boonies. That's another day. But now with technology and with this Maxwell Leadership app, we're going to be able to provide that for you. So get on it free right now, and then when it comes out, we'll let you know. So go to Maxwell Leadership app, and let's why don't we take a journey together, okay, to change lives and help people. I've talked way too long. I'm very sorry, but again, it was totally your fault. I love you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.